But I do want to turn to something else that President Joe Biden talked about today, voting rights. Georgia is the epicenter of a country struggling with systemic racism. The state, the site of Tuesday's attacks, but also a political battleground over voting rights. Georgia's newly elected Senator, Reverend Raphael Warnock, took to the Senate floor for his first speech, and he highlighted the issue.
We are witnessing right now a massive and unabashed assault on voting rights, unlike anything we've ever seen since the Jim Crow era. Politicians in my home state and all across America, in their craven lust for power, have launched a full-fledged assault on voting rights. They are focused on winning at any cost, even the cost of the democracy itself.
So, Dan, let's unpack this. Why has Georgia become such an epicenter as this country addresses both issues of race and democracy?
Well, a couple of reasons, Rachel. One, obviously, is the role that Georgia played in this election, giving the state's electoral votes to Joe Biden, for the first time a Democrat winning in many, many years. Secondly, having two runoff elections for the Senate on the same day, something we've never seen before, and both of those seats going to the Democrats, which handed Democrats control of the Senate. But the third issue was the focus on the state by former President Trump in his effort to undo the election, in his effort to overturn the election. And as a result of that, it became a flashpoint for the country as a whole on the issue of voting rights. And what we're now seeing is that Republicans are moving in Georgia and in many other states to introduce and try to pass legislation to restrict voting, and we're seeing in Washington Democrats moving in the opposite direction with a very large sweeping bill, H.R. 1 and S1, which would dramatically change the rules for voting in federal elections. And so you have now an enormous clash brewing between Republicans in the states and Democrats in Washington.
Jacob, I believe we have you back now, and I just want to go back to my question to you. We saw people marching in the streets there in Los Angeles. Give us the perspective from where you are.
Well, what I'd say is I think that the Asian American population here in Los Angeles County, to remind everybody, it is the largest county by population in the entire nation. 11 million people live here. There are more people of Asian descent living in Los Angeles County than any other county in the United States of America. Of course they feel left out over conversations about civil rights, civil justice, and accountability when it comes to this extraordinary rise in acts of hate and hate crimes against members of the AAPI community. And, you know, to me, what this is about, having covered the issues around the border over the course of the last administration, is that when you have racist rhetoric coming from political leadership, there are consequences to that. It's more than just words matter. It's about how we cover those issues as well. And too often when we talk about the fact that Los Angeles is a majority-minority county in a majority-minority state, we're not covering the stories of the AAPI community. And frankly, as a profession, as journalists, I think we must do better.
Laura, we talked about how this is all playing out there in Georgia. President Biden saying that voting rights is an issue that is also dividing Americans. You know, we just passed the 56th anniversary of Selma. The Brennan Center says there have been more than 250 bills introduced in 43 states that would restrict access of voting. So what are some of the challenges and roadblocks that Democrats are going to face with trying to address this issue?
Yeah, well, one of the biggest roadblocks is the fact that that bill that Dan was just talking about, H.R. 1, which is now S1, the massive voting rights bill, is pretty much going to stall in the U.S. Senate. And that's because of the fact that it's a 50-50 split Senate. It would require to meet a 60-vote threshold in order for it to even come to the floor. And so that is the biggest hurdle for Democrats right now. And in that same speech that you played a clip from, Rachel, by Reverend Warnock, Senator Warnock, he said he specifically targeted the filibuster, which is what requires that 60-vote threshold. And he said that the institution itself, that Republicans are protecting the minority, that minority party, rather than minority voters, and ensuring that minority voters, Black, Brown, Asian voters would be able to have unimpeded access to the voting booth. And so one of the biggest arguments right now, especially from House Democrats, including House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn, is that he is tying that filibuster, which is what Democrats feel is going to absolutely block passage of voting rights reforms. They are connecting that directly to racism. And so they're trying to apply a lot of pressure to their Senate Democratic colleagues to try to reform the filibuster in some way in order to make sure that those voting rights protections are passed.
And just a follow up to that, Laura, because we heard from President Joe Biden, he did comment on this. He said he may be open to reform on the filibuster. Do you think that would amp up the pressure on the White House to reconsider addressing this?
Potentially. When Biden said that he was open to reform, he was talking about a talking filibuster, which in effect just makes it more painful for the minority to block legislation. It wouldn't actually take away that 60 vote threshold. But it was significant that he even took the step towards saying that he was open to reform. And so as more House Democrats, as civil rights leaders, really put the pressure on the White House, as well as Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, you could see Democrats slowly but surely in the Senate start to move toward taking that action. Chuck Schumer is planning to potentially, bring the voting rights bill to the floor. It'll probably fail if it's brought to the floor in regular order, and then that could apply even more pressure to the holdouts in the caucus who right now aren't for reforming the filibuster. But you see day by day, just yesterday, Senator Martin Heinrich decided to call for abolishing the filibuster. And you see day by day a few more Senate Democrats starting to get on board with that. So as this progresses, and as more and more of Biden's agenda items meet resistance, you could see the White House and Senate Democrats slowly move towards more aggressive reform on that legislative filibuster.